Actually, one of you need to stay.
I'm just looking there, I think so.
Sesquicentennial Legacy Project, page 35. Would somebody like to make a motion on this? Councillor Long, do you have any? Councillor Tanaka.
The council choose the Centennial Accord Monument as the Town of High Prairie's legacy project.
Anybody have any comments? Mayor Fox?
The Centennial Accord Monument, I'm not sure, do I have any information as to what exactly it is?
No.
So, I'm kind of at a loss to support this because I don't know what it is. And I'm not sure what the revitalization of J.C. Park is, because I don't know what that one was. And I'm kind of wondering what McIntyre Park's legacy project would entail. And I guess the other is, I'm not sure also, the discussion says we can choose all three of them, but I don't know how much each one of them is going to cost. So I'm kind of at a loss. I don't think there's enough information here to make a decision.
Councillor Long.
The Centennial Accord Monument is a teepee-like structure that sort of entwines, and it's something that Tammy Kalita had brought forward as part of the Friendship Accord, and not sure exactly the design, nor are we sure of the cost. The revitalization for JC was brought forward by Lori Matthews, and it's a big undertaking. Has a lot of different components to it, from dog parks to fixing up playgrounds at JC Park to revitalizing the trails, but a lot of that certainly falls under the purview of the rec board. And so I'm not sure how that would work, and because it's so multifaceted and big, I'm not sure of the expenses or the costs, but it's a huge undertaking. The McIntyre Park is basically down to the gazebo, and so the gazebo is about $7,500, I believe, is what the quote was by Cody Calhoun to build it. The nice thing about that is, if we get some movement with our friends at ESSO, it's something that could be moved or something that we could redo there at a later date. But that's, you asked, that's what that's about. And so if we were to put the application through, basically we have to decide whether or not we want to apply for one, two, or all three, and then divide the proceeds. I don't know if the JC Park one is viable, to be honest. It's big. It's a big project, and the other two meet some criteria. Of course, the monument is a friendship accord with our First Nations partners, which is one thing that is looked favorably upon by the Canada 150. And McIntyre Park is, from what I understand, there's a letter of support being requested from Friendship Center, because it's right by there. So that's all I have as information for that. Dollar figures for the first two, I am not sure. We just don't have a dollar figure for that. I know Tammy was working on that one for the monument. Part of that also is going to be involved at the hospital. So that may be a cost that's incurred by the development of the hospital, may not be on the exact
So I was just gonna say is that there's some, unfortunately, we're put under time constraints. And we had the treasurer at our last meeting, and she said that there's grant deadlines that we have to get an application in for a legacy project by the end of this month. 3 of these projects, potentially 4, because ESSO is another project that the group has been looking at. Not one of those projects really has, well, I shouldn't say, the McIntyre Park does have some dollars attached to it already, but it's almost a completed project. So it was started prior to sesquicentennial, so it's not necessarily a project that committee's taken on, although it can certainly be part of a legacy for High Prairie. So the Accord, which is in the process of coming to, they're working on the Accord, the idea was to have the signing of the Accord at the teepee at the hospital. There is a teepee already in the structure of the hospital, and they plan on meeting with us to show us what they're gonna do and whether or not what exists would work to have the signing of the Accord at that grand opening and at the hospital, or at the hospital at another point in time. That meeting hasn't happened. We're waiting to hear from Alberta Health Services. So on top of that, Tammy came up with the idea of just having a monument that we either put on the hospital grounds or we put somewhere else in High Prairie that would be representation of the Accord signing, and that would be for, a monument in the area for everybody to have, and that be a legacy. Now, she came up with some preliminary numbers, but they're really rough, so nobody wanted to put forward those numbers. They're working on trying to see whether or not that's even viable, because they don't even know the material cost on that. But when Terry was there, she wanted to put something forward. Now, Lori presented a phased project at J.C. Park, which I agree with Councillor Long, it is a very big project, but it also could start in a very small capacity, and it could end up being that we do this much this year, and then over the next 5 years or 10 years, the community supports enhancing that park. And the thought behind that was to make a legacy for the area that can be used by all, take a property that we already have and enhance it. They've been finding they're getting lots of compliments this summer on ball tournaments that are coming into the area, saying what a great park we have, but we have very bad bathrooms, we have not a very good shelter area, picnic tables, the concession, all of those things are in really bad shape and need some time, money, and repair. And that tackling this as a legacy project, especially right now when there's no real playground area or not much for playground areas, they thought that might be a good opportunity to take a look at if there's town reserves. Do we have any money allocated for playground? Can we together jointly with even maybe the Sports Complex Society tackle a project like this that might even have a splash pad, a batting cage, beach volleyball. There's a lot of different things, and not every component is extremely expensive, but when you put it all together, I agree, it's a big undertaking. And Terry wanted something for the end of the month. So this is why this is, and I agree, but if I was looking at this for the first time, I'd be like, I have no idea what this is. Okay.
I think I got people a little confused. These are two totally separate issues. The money that was given for the sesquicentennial, I'm going to get that word right yet, the sesquicentennial committee is for a legacy project. Whatever you guys decide to do that with that is different, but this grant is very restrictive, and 99% of what you guys have given me does not qualify. Anything that would be done otherwise does not qualify. Only something that's totally unique and something that would be, it's just because of the 150th, and it will not, it can't be 90% of what's in your J.C. Park, 90% of what's in McIntyre. It doesn't fit the criteria of this grant. This grant is much more restrictive, so that's a separate component. I can still apply for part of this grant, and then you guys can still discuss your legacy project for other things separately. But the one I need to know about is the grant application. And the one section that was in the J.C. Park one that does qualify was the mosaic. Canada 150 mosaic painted by local artistic people. That, according to the grant coordinator I spoke to out of Edmonton, that would qualify. It's something that would encompass different age groups, different nationalities, and would be something, the theme would be 150. It's something that would qualify for their grant. In the other one for McIntyre, there was something to do with murals. Having murals painted by school kids and by different, again, cultures, whatever else, different parts, that would qualify as the thing. The huge TP would qualify. These are things, but the TP won't qualify because the guy said it cannot be replicated. It's not unique. The original is in Illinois. There would have to be enough differences that it would be allowed. The TP, the project that for the grant, it has to be something unique. It cannot be something that's been replicated elsewhere. And the original of that TP is in Illinois.
I'm totally confused now.
Councillor Gilroy?
Actually, we did discuss that this would be a little confusing at the last meeting. And one of the things that our treasurer was very good to point out was that regardless of what projects we put up, we could not guarantee any extra funding. It would have to come out of the funds set aside by the council of the money you'd already set aside for this particular committee. And that if any extra money came in, then that would be a bonus to it. And so one of the ideas we also came up with was that, and if the council would like to, we can also give you some further information in the sense that, for example, we can give you a copy, send each council member a copy of the JC Park proposal. It was very extensive and parts in that would go with it. And sorry, I had to laugh when you said our children's playground, which is right now a swing set without a swing. That's all that's there. But the idea is that we could bring you all this stuff, send it to the council. But we also thought one thing that was also mentioned is if council would like to, you could prioritize it as to what the council wanted to do. And then say, for example, the sculpture was number one. Then the money comes in and the money set aside for it, if there's extra, it goes to number two. And then number three. So it's whatever order you wanted it in, is what I'm saying. That was one of the suggestions as well at our meeting, to make sure that council knew that we were thinking about the dollars and being responsible, but also being as creative as possible. And that's roughly what we're thinking.
Councillor Danaka?
Okay, now I'm really confused. The sesquicentennial, now, this is my understanding of the sesquicentennial committee. And this is the money that was set aside by council, which would, by the time this starts, would be 100,000, correct? Now, my understanding, that money would be used to enhance the organizations in town if they're having something with the sesquicentennial. So I guess my confusion comes, that was sort of my understanding, but listening to what Councillor Gilroy is saying, and unless I'm interpreting it wrong, you're saying that the $100,000, we can parcel that out to 3 legacy projects?
No, I apologize for that. There's a certain percentage, I believe that the mayor said was 60% of the 100,000 that was going towards a legacy project. The other 40% would be going towards honorariums, enhancing projects that would be set aside for it. So only 60% at somewhere around there would be is what we were actually looking at.
Based on rough numbers and the little bit of criteria that you provided us, what Councillor Danaka proposed, which was the TP monument as part of the grant application, is probably the one we should consider based on when we did look at the numbers that came forward at our meeting. They were $50,000 was what. So if we have to allow 60%, well, I guess that's talking about this, but this amount of money, or sorry, the money that's set aside, it's a doable project if that's where the numbers actually come in. Now, you threw a new twist in the fact that it's a replica, and it sounds like they would want it to be presented more authentically. Like we may have to make changes in the design. Doesn't sound like that may be that impossible though. Like, it sounds like, quite honestly, it sounds like we have to jump through a lot of hoops to get any money from this,
Yes, this grant does require a lot of hoops to be jumped, which is why I thought whatever project, like, even if you guys chose to have the TP as your main legacy project for the sesquicentennial, your second project or your third project is what I can apply for the grant for. That's up to you guys. Whichever project you guys want me to apply for, I'll apply for, but I need to know which one. But their criteria are strict, yes.
and the funds, how much is it?
Maximum maximum of 50,000 as per the RFD there.
Councillor Panas?
So if we apply for this grant, when would we likely hear back? If it's gotta be in by the end of the month, or is the turnaround quick?
The preliminary has to be in by the end of the month, and they've got so many people sending in already the last few weeks, which is why I wanted numbers like a month ago. And it's a first come, first serve, so once they run out of money, that's it. And when I was talking to him last week, he said that there's still money, I need to get it in there fast. Once it's approved, then we can flesh out more over the next month or so of the final draft of the grant application, what needs to be in there, all the details, all the numbers, everything else. And he says once that comes in, it's usually approved within a few weeks.
Okay, so
So
we
the
could-
turnaround is fast once the final draft is in.
Okay, so that we'd find out fairly quickly then whether or
Correct.
not we'd have it, and so. And I guess I'm just curious about the two other projects that you felt would qualify for this, the mosaic and the mural. Maybe you could say more about those, or somebody on the committee.
I can't give you more detail than what I have on this paper, so hopefully the committee knows more.
Okay.
I'm not sure on the mosaic. Again, that was something that was sort of brought forward at the last sesquicentennial committee meeting, and it was brought up. It was a big package. There was lots of ideas, lots of scope. So, to be honest, I didn't really see and pay a lot of attention on that mural, the mosaic. That being said, the mural is something that was going to be approached to the elementary and the high schools, and they were going to resurface the concrete walls at McIntyre, and then the murals would be painted all along there, depicting the area's history from First Nations all the way through to fur trade and farming and agriculture, and right through to present day. It'd be a mural all around that concrete wall. So all done by students here and local artisans. That's all I know about that one.
Is there cost that attached to that?
No, I don't know the costs. I'm sure there must be costs, but I don't know what the cost would be.
Sounds like it might not be something we need grant for though. Great idea, but maybe we don't need, if we're not going to students.
I think that the grant itself, we're gonna have problems with, I believe. I was hoping that we could keep it simpler, but now we have this convoluted sort of picture of all these different ideas without having a lot of information for council. And that makes it very frustrating. When you think back to McIntyre and how much discussion we put on the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for McIntyre and the costs that were needed with 28, 30 people coming to volunteer their time, these projects, and especially, and I only go down to the park itself, it falls back to the first statement, or one of the last statements here, that proposed project must not be core business and be specifically designed for Canada 150. So that's where obviously the mosaic comes into play. It's designed specifically for that. Everything else in that park, JC Park Revite, are things that either the town or the rec board are responsible for in the day-to-day operations of the park. So it wouldn't qualify for that. And so it sort of leaves us down to the monument and or the gazebo structure at McIntyre, which would be a legacy project as such. But it's a tough one.
Councillor Sniper? Oh,
conversation here, I'm really not, at this point, supportive of the monument in the sense that this only really speaks to one segment of our population, and that's the native Aboriginal portion. I don't see that the Ukrainians, the Germans, the Scandinavians, or any other immigrant area, people that are coming to this area, would feel that this would be something that they would appreciate as a centennial monument, whereas the mural, I think, is much better. It uses the students of our area. It involves them in the celebration of the 150, and I think that the citizens of the town would see more of a inclusiveness in a mural, as they did embracing the railway mural once it was done. There was a lot of discussion to begin with as to what the heck are they doing out there, and yet now it's quite well received. I think that I think we should be looking at the mural in McIntyre Park, because that park is coming together, and I think a mural would only enhance it. The Friendship Accord, it's going to go ahead anyways. I don't think it needs a specific teepee. It just is a statement of the friendship of the surrounding areas and the town, but I don't think it's a monument that we would be looking forward to saying year after year, similar to the museum. Well, that was our 1967 centennial project, and it is still standing, and we still use it a lot, and da-da-da-da-da. The mural would fit that.
When you read the criteria for the grant, which is part of what we need to consider, because otherwise all we're doing is trying to get money from the government, and at this point we can decide to make a change in what we want for a legacy project, or maybe we find funding for other legacy projects. But it says supporting efforts towards reconciliation of Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. Proposed project must show a strong community support, be engaging and participatory. I do think that what Don brought forward with the TP does do that, and especially if we take a look at the wording towards reconciliation in Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. This is the year of reconciliation. Canada 150th, supporting an Indigenous relationship, building that relationship, I think has extreme importance for this community. I mean, I do hear what you're saying, that there's other communities and other cultures that may not have a pole in the teepee, but that can still be something that can be dealt with. You know, we can as a committee decide that, because the way the design of this, and you guys don't have the opportunity to have seen any of the preliminary designs, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to have a place for other cultures. Like right now, they're talking about every pole representing one of the First Nations and one of the Métis and First Nations, but it doesn't mean that we have to exclude other groups, and we could make it a more inclusive project, but we could still present it and it would fit a lot of that criteria. Where I think that the painting project, an awesome project, but I do think that it's not gonna take the $50,000 grant. And if we're going to the schools to get it, then we may be able to get more than just the one. Councilor Tanaka?
The reason that I chose the teepee is based on what was presented to me. And in reading what some of the restrictions on the grants would be, I thought that was the best one that fit. I understand where the mayor is coming from. There's really not a lot of information, and I went with that one based on the fact that having Linda on the committee, she had said that there's a time constraint with getting the application in, so that's sort of why I went with that one, because it seems to be progressing in terms of the committee and what's happening. I mean, McIntyre Park was a project sort of taken on by beautification and stuff, not that it can't be a legacy project, but based on what I was reading and what was presented to me, that's why I chose the Centennial Court monument.
Councillor Long?
But as we now know, the structure as it's been chosen would not qualify, because it's not one of a kind. So that would require all of the work to try to redesign and come up with something. I do know that in order to put the mural on, the resurfacing of the concrete, I believe Devin Perisky said it would be about $10,000 to do the whole concrete and get everything resurfaced in the park. But that's, aside from the paints and all the supplies, I'm not sure what else would be available out of that, like, or how much it would come to. I don't know.
Councillor Canasi?
I'd still like to find out a little bit more about the mosaic. What was the plan there as one part of a J.C. Park enhancement? And I like that one just because it's sort of something that I think a lot of people would use. It starts the ball rolling on the enhancement or changes to J.C. Park and to make that better. And I like that sort of concept, but I have no idea what the thinking is behind it. So maybe just a bit more on that would help me. Okay.
I can read the sentence that's on this page from J.C. Park. It's to create an inviting entrance, a Canada 150 mosaic painted by local artistic people. Now, if you guys have seen the Canada 150 mosaic, the outline that's been handed out by the federal government, it's got little bits and pieces to make up the figure of a maple leaf. So each little piece would be a different group or a different theme, all tied to the 150th, but one could be the native, one could be the French, one could be the different things. And there's no size restriction, whatever size that you guys decide, but it would be part of the entrance. Other than that, the details, I couldn't go any further than that.
So if I got this right, is it going to be an archway going over the entrance with this on
I got
top,
the impression,
or is it a plaque on the side?
the impression I got is that it was going to be on the ground, like type of thing, and then of course coated so that people can walk on it and look at it and read it and look at it while they're standing. That was the impression I got.
Okay.
Councillor Gilbert?
I can probably answer your question a little bit more since the discussion was at my end of the table. It was actually part of a discussion on the rebranding of J.C. Park. They were suggesting that to put the mural in there and maybe even change the name of the park was one suggestion, with actually naming rights. The money for the naming rights would go back into any refurbing of it. Some of the suggestions were things like, since we have a lot of baseball tournaments there, the children's area, so that the parents can actually have the children do something safe while they're playing ball. Horseshoe pit for bringing in the Alberta Horseshoe Association competitions, things like that. But my question actually, I wanted to ask a question just to our treasurer here. You had said during our meeting that any sort of money came, it would have to be put on town-owned land. I believe you said, and my question would be, could we actually, could we actually move that, in theory, that monument and put it as a centerpiece in the park, because it is a reconciliation one, and have even to the mural as well, having First Nations actually involved, and the Ukrainian people involved, and the whole thing involved as one project.
Terry?
The guy I spoke with at the grant coordinator stated that it did not have to be on our land if it was movable.
Oh,
If it's movable, then it can be on somebody else's land, because then if they tell you to get off, you can. For example, the gazebo could be anywhere if it's put on skids. Then it can be moved to any property. The monument, if it's 50 feet high and 50 feet in diameter, I don't think it's movable.
Terry, the gazebo, I got the impression when you first started talking that it wasn't going to qualify, because it's not a unique Canada 150.
It depends on how it's built and what's put onto it, like this, a plain gazebo wouldn't qualify, because a plain gazebo is just like any other gazebo anywhere. If it was made to fit the theme of 150 and become a legacy project, then it would qualify.
So anything that we make to fit and become a 150, whether it's the monument, whether it's the centennial entrance of the park.
But it has to be unique. Something about it has to be unique. They don't want anything that is part of your regular operations, something that's totally different.
Councillor Danaka.
I'm not sure if we're gonna resolve this issue tonight. I mean, there is a motion on the floor. We should vote on that, and if we're gonna carry on, then we should, like I said, I voted for the monument, and then now I'm hearing that doesn't qualify, so I'm not sure where to go with this. And what we're looking at, because there is a time constraint by the end of the month, so I don't know where, I mean, everybody has their opinion on which project they want. We have 3 to choose from. And it's based on a timeline.
Originally, the grant stated that you could have as many project applications as you wanted, which I thought, oh great, we can put all 3 of them forward. And, there's no timelines or anything. But when I spoke to the person, they had a much, much bigger response than they anticipated, and they've had to amend the thing that they had given us online. And it's being amended constantly. They've had so many applications.
Which is why there was 3 going forward to everybody, because it was only when we read our council package that we found that there was a change in that. Because otherwise we thought we had more information that could have been provided, but it wasn't that necessary, because it was just let's get the grant applications out, let's see what maybe gets any success, and then from there we can iron out details.
Correct.
Yeah. Mayor Cox.
What happened to the foundation over in Grand Prairie? That was a Sesquicentennial Foundation, that money was supposed to be available there.
Yeah, and it is available.
That's a different grant, though.
That's a different grant, and
Okay,
that's the thing we're
alright.
gonna find, is there's gonna be different
Yeah.
grants along the way, and that's why I say we don't have to take anything off the table, it's what do we want Carrie to apply for the money for now? Because she's gotta put an application in by the end of August, that's all.
Then I would suggest, as Councillor Danaka has said, that I think that each councillor should take the 3 items, number them 1, 2, 3, give them to the administrator, and he can see which one comes out as number 1 for the application process.
And we can provide all the more information that we have to each councillor too, so you have a better understanding of what we've actually known.
What would be the deadline that you would need to have that information to the councillors?
Friday is the 26th. If I had them by Friday noon at the very, very latest, I could still write up the grant and send it in by the 31st.
Okay, so any further information has got to be given to the councillors by Thursday. That gives you, by tomorrow, Thursday. Thursday, close of business. It gives you 1 morning to prioritize 1, 2, 3, and give it to Brian. And that should be, I think that would be the fairest for this grant, for this specific grant.
Correct.
And this grant does not use any of our $100,000 legacy money,
Correct.
okay?
Did you have something else, Councillor?
No, I was just gonna comment on something very similar to that as a way of getting through it, and it wouldn't be 1, 2, 3 with McIntyre Park, it would be a specific project, right? And I think we need to,
JC Park.
well,
Or both.
like on here, it says JC Park and McIntyre Park, but I think we are gonna say Mosaic at McIntyre, and it would say, the mural at, yeah, so just be very specific, so it's not too general. Cause there's really 3 things that we're talking about, specifically, not just the broad umbrella of McIntyre Park.
Councillor Tanaka.
Okay, based on what I'm hearing, I'm withdrawing my motion. Mayor Cox, if you wanna make your motion about getting people to go 1, 2, 3, getting that information carried, let's move on this issue.
I move that the Sesquicentennial Committee provide as much information as possible regarding the 3 projects for the grant application. I don't know what the name of your grant application people are.
Canada 150 fund.
And the 150 fund. That the councillors will prioritize the 3 projects: the Centennial Accord Monument, the J.C. Park mural, and the McIntyre Park mosaic.
Vice versa.
The other way around? Okay.
Yeah, McIntyre mural, JC mosaic.
All right, J.C. mosaic, okay. And that, the information has got to be provided to the councillors by Thursday, closing day of business. And voting, prioritizing must be into the CAO by noon Friday.
Got that?
With the highest number going, what she applies for, or what?
Prioritizing number 1 will be
So
the
most
choice.
number one,
So we good?
I would email all the council on the contract.
Yep, okay, sounds good.
All those in favor? Carried. Thanks, Carrie. A little bit painful.
So whatever information we got,
Yes.
they can send it, otherwise we're voting just.
Well, then we'll give everybody an opportunity to get that information. Okay, page 37. 2015-2019 intermunicipal cost sharing memorandum of agreement. 5B1, Councillor Panasic.
I move that council approve the change of dates from March 31st and June 30th, September 30th, and December 31st for the requisition payments of the library board to January 1st, April 1st, July 1st, and October 1st in the 2015 to 2019 municipal cost sharing agreement.
Mayor Cox.
I would like to know the recommendation from the treasurer on what impact this will have, if any.
It's not recommended. In most businesses, most organizations, you pay at the end of a quarter, not at the beginning. And that's for various reasons. In case a business or organizations become defunct during that time period, you haven't paid them for 3 months and they no longer exist. When a janitor or somebody else does a contract for you and you pay them at the beginning of the month, they don't have to show up, you've already paid them. It's normal to pay at the end. I don't know why there was another organization that was changed to be paid at the beginning, and that should never have happened in the first place. It's industry standard to pay at the end of a quarter.
Councillor Gilroy.
This is Terry Mouse, let's just stay up here for a minute. I was looking at the draft you gave, and the draft under B section says the term of this, the agreement you're showing here, this is a draft, says that it's from January 1st, 2017 to 2021, which is a different one than what actually here with the RFD. But also, if we did change it, how would that affect the adjustments that you guys have already made because of the overpayment this year? Because I'm just wondering if when would this take effect? Beginning next year? How would that, because you've already made some arrangements.
I'll let
I'll answer.
Brian answer the first one.
The first part is, the dates are January 1st, 2017 to December 31st of 2021. This is a new draft that I had drawn up for the intermunicipal agreement committee, which we discussed yesterday at our meeting. And this is forwarded on, back onto the recommendation from that committee was to forward back onto respective councils for approval. So this entire agreement will be coming back to council, and within this agreement, for example, the airport has been taken out. The tourism has been changed, so this is just a draft indicating the dates, showing the schedule of the pay as they are now.
Councillor Danaka?
I'm not sure where Councillor Gilroy is getting, my understanding is there's never been an overpayment?
It's not an overpayment per se. What happened is that they got paid in December last year, their payment for this year. So basically last year they received 5 payments. They got it that early that they got paid 3.5, 4 months ahead of the normal schedule. So they got 5 payments last year instead of 4. So it depends which way you want to look at it. It's not an overpayment per se. They just got 5 of their requisitions last year, which means they only get 3 this year.
Okay, now, the prior to this year, the library was receiving their their payments at the first of every month, no?
I checked back up to 2000. I didn't go back further than the year 2000. From 2000 till 2014, they were paid in March, June, September, and December, almost every time, the end of the quarter for all those years. There was a couple of payments that Jerry Blakey had made in January for the first payment to start them off, so at the first of the year they wouldn't be as strapped for cash for the first quarter. Somehow or another, it got off track the last 2 years, and they started getting paid earlier and earlier, until the point that they're getting paid at the beginning of the quarter the last 2 years.
But I hear what you're saying about it's not a business practice or a common business practice, but we're dealing with nonprofit and organization. So we're not dealing with business for profit. So for them to be, we don't want our library and our recreation board to be, well, I guess we'd love them to be lots of profit, but the reality is there's services in the area. To be able to offer their services, they should be basically spending their money and only asking us for what they need to operate for the year. So how can we in January give them nothing if they should have used their money all year long? Like, otherwise, I don't understand. Like, I mean, I understand in the business community, you should be working hard and, you know, and saving money and being diligent and having 3 months rent stuck aside. Is that what we expect from our library, is to be presenting to us a slightly higher budget so they can have that funds? And like, how else will they be able to pay their wages in January, February, and March?
Okay. To begin with, most other municipalities do the same thing. It's at the end of the quarter. Number 2, whether it's a nonprofit or a business, most organizations have a line of credit to begin with. In this case, there's also the county that does pay them early. And so even if the intermunicipal says the end of the quarter, we still have the option to pay earlier. But if you put it at the beginning of the quarter, you're restricting yourself and you have no choice. Now, the reason that it was put at the end of the quarter in the past, not necessarily as much now, but was like I mentioned a couple months ago. In about February, March, we start getting strapped for cash because we've started paying off all our stuff. We don't have any income coming in. All our grants come in May and June. 90% of our tax revenues came in May and June. That has changed a little bit over the year because a lot of people, over the past few years, because a lot of people are starting to make monthly payments. But I'd say that we still have 60% of our people still pay May and June. And all our grants are May and June. So especially from about January, February, it gets tighter and tighter. By March and April, we are very strapped. When I was here before, we had trouble. We weren't sure how we were going to pay all our bills by the end of the month at that time of the year. And that was one of the reasons why it became the end of the quarter, amongst the other reasons. There's a lot of reasons. Nowadays, we seem to be a little bit more flush than we have been in the past, but we still could go back to being that way depending on what happens. I would recommend leaving it to the end of the quarter, and then we have the option of paying early. There's nothing stopping us from paying early. But if it restricts us to the beginning of the quarter, basically we have no choice.
Councillor Gilroy?
I need to apologize to Councillor Yanaka for the wrong wording I used. All I knew is that we had paid them one extra one, and I remember a couple meetings ago where a CAO had said that arrangements were made so that they would actually not be penalized for having the change in admin over there, then put it in early. But the other thing that I was looking at is you're talking a difference of basically 1 day from what they're looking at. And I was looking at the draft, and that's what confused me, because your new draft actually has the changes already in it for the library. on page 42 or page 4 there.
That is
So
proposed.
if we're looking at the changes taking place January 1st, or if that's when we're looking at it, or whatever you can for next year, it's pretty much already done in the draft. I wonder why we're really talking about this if it's in the proposed draft. Because we'll be discussing it later.
They're just anticipating. Brian already presented this at the intermunicipal, anticipating that this council would consider the request of the library, as did the council of the county, and changing the dates in order to make those changes in the agreement. So he only anticipated that that's what would be done, and he presented it to us yesterday at intermunicipal. If this council doesn't agree, he'll make those changes and we won't have those payments.
But it's one day.
No, it's, no,
From
it's
December
not.
31st to
No.
No,
3 months.
3 months. The payments before were March 31st for the first quarter, June 30th for the second quarter, September 30th for the third quarter, and December 31st for the fourth quarter. Okay, so now we're changing it from March 31st for the first quarter to January 1st. That's 2 months and 29 days, or 2 months and 30 days, depending on the quarter.
Councilor Danaka.
I don't know about the rec board, but I definitely know the library does not have a line of credit. I don't know if the rec board does. I'm not, I'm kind of agreeing with Councilor Rose in the sense that, you know, we expect these nonprofits to function and give a service, yet we're hindering them when we, because this is sort of the way they've operated for the last 2 years. That's what that's what they were instructed to do. Now we're changing the rules in a sense, but not really. You understand what I'm saying? And when I'm saying that
I understand, but
changing the
don't
rules in
agree.
a little bit.
Councilor Long.
I always try to look at what our staff is telling us, and if they're telling us no on any issue and it has sound reasoning to it, I'm gonna side with the staff every time, because it's not our field of expertise. And so our treasurer is saying this could pose problems for us in the future if we continue it this way. And so I'm siding on I'm gonna err on caution there and take her advice. She's the professional and she's telling us this is the best way to handle it. Anybody else wanna step up and deny it? I don't know, I'm just saying, she's telling us, be careful.
Terry, what's the amount of money that we're talking, that we would, the biggest question for you is not having money in January. After that, throughout the year where you don't have a problem, you're saying that the January payment is the tightest one maybe to make.
If we change our payments to January 1st, March 1st, and June 1st, we will have trouble with possibly three payments. Definitely 2, possibly 3.
So we're running in that poor financial shape that how much of payments are we talking about?
We're not running in poor shape at the present time, was what I'm saying. When I was here before, we didn't even know if we had enough money to pay the staff or make any of our payments on a month-to-month basis. I wound up checking into all the grants and got $3 million into this office that was 3 years past due. Then we had money, okay? That's how bad things were when I started here. I don't have it in front of me. I
Do you
did
have an
bring it.
idea of how much the quarterly payments are?
Just a moment.
Because as you're finding it, the other thing that we have to consider is we are doing this for recreation. This is the payment schedule for recreation, so how can we would then have to consider, do we have to change it? And I'll ask the chair of recreation to tell me whether you guys can operate if we were to change the schedule as the treasurer's request, basically, because she thinks that we should be paying it at a different time. Obviously, it's gonna hinder us in both of those, right? And we can't treat one entity different than the other. I just want to ask him the question, if he thinks.
I don't have that financial information for it.
Okay, so the library requisition is about $200,000, so it would be about $50,000. But I caution, like I said, it's not necessarily the total amount, because now you're gonna set another precedent with another organization, and they're all gonna expect it at that time.
do we have other organizations beside recreation and
You've got
the museum?
You've got the museum, you've got, all the
CSS?
yeah, FCSS, all the other intermunicipal stuff that we are currently paying to the county and back and forth between us. There are payments that are coming out sometimes only every 6 months or once a year. That could be changed also. I always leery of setting a precedent. The rec was not supposed to have been changed. And I don't know, during the time I was gone, it was changed. And so, according to Lori, I spoke with her. She said that it used to be the end of the quarter for them also. In practice, they were actually getting it ahead of time, but it was still put at the end in the intermunicipal, because she checked into it for me. And so they just put it in writing what was already happening. But now it's become an issue because other organizations want to be treated the same. There was a precedent set at that time and it shouldn't have been, and I don't like precedents.
Any other comments? Councillor Panasic?
Yeah, just for me, you know, I hear what some are saying, but I think this is an organization that's our town. It's our town, really, right? And we share some of the costs. And they need the money to operate in those first 3 months or whenever we make the payment. I see it as different than a business. I appreciate what Terry's saying, but I mean, we're paying the same amount. It's just when are we paying it out? And I mean, if we get to the point where we're having difficulty making payments for then we would really have to relook at it, but hopefully we'll never get to that point again. So I'm in favor of keeping it on with the new schedule so that they have the money up front to spend as they get it. They get the money early, they spend it, then they get some more. So that they can pay their bills in a timely manner also.
Mayor Fox?
I'm afraid on this one I would have to agree with Councillor Long, because I do worry about the fact that we're totally dependent upon taxpayer money coming in a major chunk of it comes in June. I don't mind leaving the schedule the way it is, and if they wish to submit a bill earlier and the treasurer sees that yes, the payment, the money is available, she knows whether or not we can afford to make that $50,000 check. Then therefore, if they want to put in all 4 requisitions at once, go ahead and as the money becomes available, no later than March 31st for the first one, no later than June 30th for the next one, then I think that we should abide with the recommendation of our staff. The other thing is too, and probably a minor detail, but having the money in our account helps us with our investments, because we will be getting a higher investment return on the money for perhaps only 2 months, but it's still an easier transition than having it sent out and that. So no, I will support Councillor Long on this one.
Councillor Gilbert?
Carrie, just one more quick question, and this goes back to where you said that we had paid one in advance, and that you and I should say not you, but the administration had made arrangements so that it would not penalize them. Can you tell me just how the next, or the date of the next couple payments? Just, I mean, I think it'd be a little bit easier to know that regardless of how we vote, there's a consistency of cash flow. And so do you happen to know the dates and to help us out?
Because they were used to getting the money early, and I wasn't here when the first 2 payments went out, and then all of a sudden get the 3rd requisition in June. What do you mean the 3rd requisition in June for July 1st? This shouldn't even be coming to me until September. The CAO and I discussed it and came up with a compromise, and we are paying them in between. So middle of August, middle of November.
You said
So-
beginning of August, actually, we haven't received it yet, just saying.
the middle of, first week to middle of August, middle of November, and that was what, it was in the email. The, accounts payable person was on vacation. It did not get done the first week of August. It is now done. I believe it has been signed and will be going out in the mail tomorrow morning. The middle of November, again, it is splitting the difference. We can still be reasonable. I know that Jerry, when she was here for the 20-some years, she would give the December check the first week or so of December so that they could make all their payments before December 31st. So, you know, the person can still be reasonable. And the other part of your question again was?
I just wanna see how the flow will go for them, since this is affecting the flow of what, their cash flow is what we're all concerned about. that they pay
The
bill.
county is paying them early, so they do have funds available, because the county does usually pay at the beginning of the quarter.
Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? So we'll read back the motion.
That council approved the change of dates from March 31st, June 30th, September 30th, and December 31st for the requisition payment to the library board to January 1st, April 1st, July 1st, and October 1st in the 2015 to 2019 intermunicipal cost sharing memorandum of agreement.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Page 43. Oh, does anybody want to take a break? Okay, 10-minute recess.